2009, the International Association for Near-Death Studies had its annual conference in San Diego, California. After interviewing several near-death experiencers, I found that if you listen to their accounts with an open mind and heart, it just might change your life.
Hello, I'm Beverly Brodsky, and I'm at the San Diego I.A.N.S convention in 2009. And I had a near-death experience when I was 20 years old as a result of a motorcycle accident in which I was thrown onto the highway near Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. And I suffered a fractured skull and numerous broken bones in my head. And I was in the UCLA hospital for 2 weeks in a semi-comatose state. And when the 2 weeks was over, the doctors sent me back to this place where I was temporarily staying. I had just moved from Philadelphia, moved across the country with no contacts, no friends, no prospects. I was just, looking for myself, and I found what I was looking for in a most unusual way, in that the doctor sent me home with no medication for the pain, and they said, "We don't usually see injuries like this except on the battlefield," because the skin had been ripped off the right side of my face, and I had to wrap this salt-soaked bandage around my adhesions, and first of all, I was in such pain. Oh, I hate to even think of it even now. And also I felt that no man would ever love me, that I would be maimed. And I didn't understand why people put up with suffering. I had no philosophical basis for suffering. I've been raised an agnostic / atheist, modern Jewish conservative denomination. And I was always told, when you're dead, you're dead. And I thought the purpose of life was to have fun and for pleasure, especially then when I was 20. And I was just unable to face this whole thing now that I was conscious. And so I threw myself down on the bed where I was temporarily staying, and becoming an agnostic in the foxhole, so to speak, I said, from the depth of my being, I said this prayer, and I begged, I said, "God, if you're out there, you can have me now, because I'm finished. There was nothing for me to live for." And I just threw myself down on the bed, and with that prayer, what amazed me is that I lifted right out of my body, and I was still aware. I was me, and yet I was not that body, and all the pain was gone. All the pain was gone, and I had this perfect, like ethereal body that didn't have an injured, smashed up head. And I felt that in some ways I was shocked, because it was so much against what I had, always believed and expected to happen, and yet there was this angel on the ceiling. And I have to admit that I played hooky from Hebrew school, and I didn't know anything about my religion because they stopped reading from the Bible in 3rd grade, so I didn't know that there were Jewish traditions about angels, and I thought that angels were something on top of a Christmas tree. So when I saw the angel, I was surprised, and I was looking at him like, are you in the right place? But he, and I felt this was the male presence, and he shined from within. He was like white and in robes, and he also had this perfect ethereal body. And he took my hand, such as it was, and I was at peace. It was like I knew him, or I didn't have any questions at that point. And we went flying out the window. And I was staying in Venice Beach, and flying out the window and going to the Pacific Ocean, which was one of my favorite things. But I wasn't looking down, because there before me, angled upwards and to the right, was this funnel-shaped object, which people today call the tunnel, but to me it looked like a funnel that was angled upwards and to the right, and it was larger at the entrance, and there was this tiny pinpoint of light at the far end, and we flew into this funnel, and it was like a portal to another dimension. And we might have flown the entire length of the physical universe, but I had no way to gauge that, because there was no space and no time in this dimension. Once we entered that area, that portal, we were outside of the space-time continuum. And it's really hard to find words for this, but so I'm going to use some metaphors. But at some point, the angel was gone, and I arrived at the other end, and there before me was the living presence of the being of light. And this being was all-knowing. It knew everything that was going to happen and will happen, and the reasons behind them. And there was a perfect justice, and it also contained all things that ever were or will be. And it was loving me. It was just pouring out this unconditional love at me. And I thought, well, this isn't the guy on the top of the Sistine Chapel. I had this, image of what God would be like, but I figured this has to be God, because this is beyond words and perfect in every possible sense. And it just also didn't make sense to me, because the world that I had left behind, we were at war in Vietnam, and I was very angry about the war, and about all the suffering that goes on this planet, and the Holocaust, which I had learned about, and we were learning more at the point in 1970. We were learning how horrible it had been. And so what happened was, in a sense, the love kept coming to me, but I just couldn't receive it at that time. And I got to ask all my big whys. I got to ask all of the things that I had ever wondered about. And those were the top 3 things that struck me, that I had spent a lot of time thinking about, and in my justification for not believing in God. and what happened is, all of my thoughts just went out telepathically, and the answers, the perfect answers, came back. It wasn't the way like we talk. It was like the entire answer and all of its ramifications instantly came into my head, and the only thing I remember, I don't remember the details, this was specifics of the answers, but I knew that I had known these things before, and I thought, oh, of course, how could I ever have forgotten? And so what happened is, after a while, I ran out of questions, because I got it. I got the whole picture, the perfect knowledge that is present in the mind of God or everywhere, and I understood it. And I no longer had a body, but using another metaphor, it was like I was like a child being cradled by a loving parent, and the being of light and I took off at the speed of thought, which is not limited by light speed and all of that, because what happened is we went around the universe, what appeared to be a universe like this one, except that there was no darkness in it. So we went from star to star, and it was from radiance to radiance, and there were no spaces in between, maybe because of the means of propulsion, you know, the perfect, and it was like when someone wants to show you their family and they take out the pictures of their children and their grandchildren. Well, these were the galaxies and the supernovas and the comets and all of these magnificent celestial objects. And the other thing I forgot to say is that the feeling that I had was that I was home. And this is where I came from. And that part of this remembering that I had in my NDE was that I had come back to where I came from. So we went on this tour, and everything was just radiant and alive. There's no dead matter. Every star, every light that we see in the sky, it is a being, is alive. And then we went to this sun that seemed to be, at first, it seemed to be in the center of all things, this whole spiritual universe. And it also seemed to have been newly formed, like it was just formed in that moment. And we went into another portal that was like at the center of the sun. And we went back into this cosmic void, like before the Big Bang, or whatever you believe. We went into this cosmic void, and I was so in love with the being of light that I and everyone else just melted back into this primal oneness. And it was just perfect. It was like the essence or the quintessence of everything that ever will exist before in the next cycle of creation was there. And I believe that we were all there, and we were all one. And I found myself coming out of this unity as a drop in this cosmic ocean and saying, oh, I remembered that I had been Beverly, but here I was, one with God and one with all things. And it was like a drop of water in the ocean. I was separate, and yet I was part of that ocean, the cosmic ocean of God and of all creation. Well, I don't remember being asked, because I never would have wanted to leave. Oh, the ecstasy is just indescribable. The feelings you have there are so much more intense than what we can experience in these bodies. It's like here we're like a little candle, and there we're like a star. It's like 1,000 times more intense. But then I found myself at some point back in that broken body. And the first thing I noticed is that the cosmic knowledge was gone. And I was thinking, oh, wait a minute, I'm back here, and I knew everything, and now it was gone, except for what I just shared, that I knew that I had known it. And, oh, the other thing is that everything is interconnected in a perfect way, and there are no accidents. Everything happens for a purpose, and that's part of our life's plan, even though we can't understand the purposes usually while we're going through it. And I knew that we cannot die, that we will just, like taking off a coat, we will just take off these bodies when they're worn out and go on to a greater, more magnificent universe. And I had to really think about everything I believed, about all the metaphysical beliefs I had at that time, and everything the culture had taught me, what I learned at school and what I learned in my family, and I just threw it all out, because the touchstone for me has always been what happened in the NDE. It was more real than my sitting here 39 years later and telling the story. That really happened. This is like a dream, but that was real.
Beverly, can you talk about what life is like now after having had this experience?
Well, it's really hard to talk about it because it's been so many years, but what happened immediately afterwards is that I had no boundaries. I was just filled up with this love and this light, and what I have been shown is that that's really what we are composed of. That's really all that is here. But and I unconditionally loved everyone. I would just look at someone and I would see the goodness inside of them, and I got really hurt doing that. Not having defenses, not having healthy boundaries, and in a way, I think I still am very empathic, and I have to be careful because I tend to take on other people's issues, and I've had a lot of psychic experiences, and like knowing, before the phone rings, who it is, and what if something bad happens. I know that something bad has happened to them, especially with people in my family and people that I care about. And I went to college after that experience, and it was really like a tremendous shutting down of my gifts and my knowingness. And what is life now? I'm now a minister in Science of Mind, which is a church that's very metaphysical and really non-denominational, because it feels more comfortable to me, because it just mirrors. It's not even my beliefs, but what I was shown to be true.
Do you feel you have a mission in life now?
Yes, I have a couple of missions, and I have to straighten out which one to focus on, because my health is pretty fragile. I had a stroke 2 years ago, and I've always wanted to write a book, and that's something that I'm skilled at, communications and writing. But I've been involved with running these groups and doing things for the larger spiritual community, and I haven't been able to figure out which is, which one is. I just go with the guidance I get at the time and what feels right to me. And my writing I put on the shelf, which I'd like to see a book on that shelf one of these days.
Okay, Beverly, thank you so much for telling us your story.
You're welcome.